So I frightened Ger with having something like 41 slides, but I go through them very quickly. First of all, thanks very much for the opportunity to speak here today. I spoke at last year's National Flood Forum as well, and it's very, very good to be back here a second year running, and so thanks very much for the opportunity to do that again. I'm going to give a very, I'll probably skip over quite a lot of slides here, but generally the area we're looking at is South Galway, North Clare, essentially where the Slieve Aughty mountains flow westwards towards Galway Bay. If they flow eastwards, it's to the Shannon, westwards is to South Galway. This is our catchment area, and it's a very, very difficult area to describe because essentially most of the flows are underground. So it's a very, very unique geology. And that means that we're very, very sensitive to rapid runoff the mountains, so that some of the swallow holes are the size of footballs. So when you get a very, very peak rain event, it's going to cause some crisis in the area. So that's a very, very quick profile of Slieve Aughty, where you see we have put a wind farm up there. There's two main wind farms in the mountain. Quite a large drop. And as it gets to down into sort of the different communities, the rivers start to go underground. So from here onwards, only about 12 kilometres is only underground. So those underground channels can't expand, and they cause a lot of issues. So it's essentially from here, flooding situations happen all the way along these different communities. So this is a snapshot of some of the flooding events. This is down in Cahermore. Again, it's a Thurlock area, so the Thurlocks start to rise, start to flood, start to join, causing devastation. So it's like a 3-week tsunami from the top of the mountain down. It takes 3 weeks after a main rainfall event for flooding to appear here. The flooding also, we talked about, days, weeks. Flooding here can be months. Some of the roads only opened 6 months after the flooding happened, so causing a lot of disruption in the area. So again, farmland, there's farmyard flooding. This is one of our committee members is down in the audience here. This is his farm, and that's supposed to be a special area conservation. But what happens is when all this basic flooding happens, it devastates the whole lifestyle of the farmer, of Martin here. It devastates the actual the environment. It causes a huge amount of issues. We talked about silt earlier on. Silt is also becoming a major problem. We're calling it the cholesterol of South Galway, because what happens is it's fine if you're dredging a river, Shannon, but you can't dredge an underground river. So we're very, very concerned that this type of silting is happening in the underground channels and going to cause a lot of issues. Again, other farms being flooded. Some bunding from previous floods happening here, so that was quite good. So quick snapshot, 35 houses flooding, 34 very badly threatened. Other statistics, 200 farms flooded, and again, some of those for about 4 months. So at that stage, reseeding and loss of livelihood there as well. And the one down at the bottom here is aggregated 1,700 days where roads were closed, where schools were inaccessible, where a 2-mile trip was a 40-mile trip. So very, very hard impacts. And the main items affecting it are the rapid runoff the Slieve Aughty mountains into these type of swallow holes, some pinch points where rivers converge, and then we have Coole Lake that just, again, there's no overground channel to the sea, so when you get too much rain, it starts to swell, it starts to cause huge issues in the area, and again, the path to the sea is usually through people's houses or homes and farms. So it's a complex area. There are many stakeholders. There's farmers, there's forestry, there's ESB has wind farms, you have a motorway going through it, you've got the marine, you've got national parks and wildlife. So there's a lot of stakeholders, and it's a complex problem. And that's the main challenge in terms of how are we supposed to look at a solution for the area when there's so many different people interacting. However, there was a real need. This is repeatedly happened in our community. At this stage, we had national coverage and we had national commitment. I presented to Taoiseach Enda Kenny after the 2015 floods, and he gave a personal commitment that he was going to ensure that the flood relief, flooding still got a good level of funding over the next few years, and that's what we've seen as well. And everybody wants a solution. It's when we decided, when we started engaging with people, we found out that things were very, very positive. So really, our approach to it was a collaborative approach. How do we bring people together on this? And actually, I think last year, Lisbeth, we had a discussion. We had one or two during the year as well, where you mentioned last year, and it's the one thing that struck me, is that we need everybody here at the table. And throughout last year, our committee is only 1 year old, probably 1 year, 2 months. But in that 1 year, 2 months, we practically have every one of these stakeholders at the table. And the thing I remember was that sometimes you said at the kitchen table. And sometimes it was these people came in for the cup of tea and we sat down and talked about things. So again, from your elected representatives to the Irish Forest Service, to GSI, OPW, National Parks and Wildlife, all of these have a voice, all of these have an influence on the overall solution. Good news is we now have a preliminary timeline for a flood relief scheme. And that's thanks a lot to Galway County Council and OPW for really coming together with us in the community to do this. And there's Mr. Enda Gallagher down there, from Galway County Council, is I think he's looking after this for Galway County Council. So, you know, it's an optimistic timeline, but we're actually here in the process where hopefully in the coming week we'll have a design consultant announced for the design of the scheme. And again, that's roughly what it looks like when you start putting everything out. So 2022 it still feels late for the community, but I still think this is an optimistic, but we have to try and keep this project on track. So collaborative engagement. In order to get the solution, you need to get the stakeholders to the table, and you need to do that in a certain way. The first one is be professional in terms of there's no point in shouting. People have jobs, people have agendas, goals, they have their objectives. People have their own motivations for doing things, and you need to tune into those rather than working against them or trying to disrespect someone. Progressive, we have to have a solution. We know there's a solution, so that is forefront at where we're heading. We have to have a solution. So if someone says you can't do that, we'll go, well, why not? Let's change something if we can't. Representative, you have to make sure that I suppose all our communities represented as well. Well informed, I think out of all of them, that's the one I think that where we've really made a significant investment as part of our own community. We had to make ourselves more informed about how things work. So when you do then approach anybody at the table, you know where you stand and you know where they stand, and they know where you stand. So you have to try and work with that. Assertive, sometimes we've had to be assertive in terms of we won't take no for an answer in certain circumstances. And we're assertive with the people that are representing us as well, and that's going to be very important. And inclusive, there's people who are part of that whole catchment area that maybe have a slightly different agenda, but they are a stakeholder. Bring them in, find out what they want, and you'll find that look for the common ground as well. Community engagement. So that's a quick dashboard of the communities involved. So the first thing we did is, for many of these communities, we have 13 or 14 representatives in these communities, and each of these people know their area, they know their issues. This is a full catchment problem, and we need a catchment solution. We had public meetings. The last meeting that we had was in April, and we had, I think, something like 240 people at that meeting. Weekly meetings, we may be going down to every 2 weeks now, but for the first year we had a meeting every week. It was very, very intensive. It's like a second full-time job. I run a blog. It's called South Galway Floods. If you Google South Galway Floods, you'll find a blog site there with, at this stage, about 40 articles. So, and we'll have a snapshot of some of those. Also Facebook. That already I've probably put two or three posts up about this event. So there's about 3,500 people are linked into that Facebook account, and they see what's going on. And we use that as well for communications. Compiling local knowledge. These are the type of articles that we've produced, describing an area, the situation, Unfortunately, this one, what happens in Tarman stays in Tarman. That is the area that basically the water, once it goes in, the only way out is evaporation. And has very, very critical for the farmers in the area. So these are all the articles, some detailed knowledge, looking at maps, talking to people, extracting the local knowledge and compiling it and presenting it back to the community or to our public representatives as well. Highlighting local issues, again, when you're assertive, you know, this is where I think this time last year we were very, very frustrated with the lack of progress because we didn't know, there was nobody actually working on this particular scheme or this particular solution. Things were in motion, but we really needed to put up the pressure and trying to highlight our issues via this forum as well. And again, there for the views of the pages here, whatever, is about 35,000 views. And the best views ever was about 2,500 in one day. Compiling local knowledge, this is a summary, okay? This is a summary sheet of probably 15 to 20 other Excel sheets that we got all our representatives to fill in. I didn't know half the people, okay? But someone flooded, someone lost access, someone's septic tank flooded, someone's farmyard flooded. That's where I was able to compile those statistics. So taking this then to say, well, how many farms over 50 acres flooded? How many houses flooded? How many were threatened? How many road closures in the different communities? So all of this was compiled and presented back to our the OPW and Galway County Council, and they compared notes as well. So we had a good feel for what's happening in the area. And actually this is going to be very important as well for the fact that it's 2022 when we're going to get a solution, hopefully. What are we going to do in the meantime? So now we know, we have a list of every house that was threatened, flooded, so we can actually start compiling emergency response plans for each particular community. So that's a very, very recent engagement we've had with Galway County Council. Other thing is informed environmental knowledge. Environment became I would say, a hammer that we used along the way to say, well, have people, not just farmers, I said if someone is going to, you know, do some forestry work or dig some drains or build a wind farm, did they do the right impact analysis? What's the impact on our catchment? And surprisingly, that seems to have been forgotten. The impact is localized. And that was one of the questions I asked earlier on. So getting aware of the Water Framework Directive, Habitats Directive, Floods Directive, it's kind of painful, but it needs to be done so that you know where you stand. Process knowledge, how do you deliver a flood relief scheme? What happens? Project brief, tender, select a consultant, feasibility, all these things, trying to figure out where we are in the scheme. So this is important to know where we're at. We're right here where we're probably going to select a consultant in the next week or so. Public representatives, I've put 3 up there, Deputy Sean Canny, Minister Kieran Cannon, Deputy Anne Rabbitt. These have been instrumental, and I've heard very, very good feedback from, you know, once you involve your public representatives and you include them and you credit them, there is a huge, you know, they carry a huge amount of weight. So this basically, these we've considered as being a team as well. And we're looking forward to a new chapter with Minister Moore as well here. Again, Galway County Council, our councillors have been very, very good support. We basically are a top agenda item in the monthly meetings. Okay, Enda nods his head, that's great. So we've worked very, very closely with Galway County Council. We're on the agenda item in monthly meetings, municipal meetings. We're working on an emergency response plan. We're very engaged with the project brief. OPW as well, and Richard Dooley, we've met him several times as well, and actually here, so you know, OPW have a lot of investment in the flood relief, the CFRAMs, etc., and have given a lot of very positive momentum to these projects as well. We met up with MEP Mary Harkin here this time last year, and she organised a trip for us to see the European Commission out to Brussels, and they gave us a lot of help with wind farms, habitats directive and knowledge as well. So there's they created a different vector that we might have time to address. National Parks and Wildlife, that's the word I want to highlight. I've heard it 3 times in this meeting, proactive. Right, they got the finger pointed at them saying, you're to blame for all the flooding. It's got very, very negative publicity. But we found willing partners and people who want to get rid of flooding just as much as anybody else because it actually destroys a lot of the things they're trying to protect here. So we found them actually very proactive as well, just like previous speaker. They actually helped us, they basically updated recommendations on the forestry, which we think is very, very important, to say, well, a few more questions and recommendations for their impact assessments. And they give us some guidance on the Habitats Directive, which we projected back to the forestry when we're doing those. Also GSI, quick snapshot here was we got a phone call one evening going, we're going to be down tomorrow, we need to install 7 monitors and 7 different Thurlocks in South Galway. What do we do? Within an hour they had the address and a phone number for every one of our representatives. So they basically got them installed the next day. We just want to enable. Again, forestry, Irish Forest Service, we've met with Minister Doyle. Basically, they did a survey of the forestry sites to come up with new recommendations that Coillte have preliminarily agreed to implementing so that they help with the flooding situation, flooding risk. ESB Windfarms, this is a landslide, happened in 2003, and in what happened to mitigate that, if you can see all these lines, we estimate 30 kilometres of deep drains on the top of a mountain without any environmental impact assessment. So we're saying, guys, you've done this, we're living with the repercussions of that potentially. What can you do? What can you do as part of the scheme as well? So other very important thing is media. So media, papers, radio, TV, we've been on the television, we've been on Nationwide, we've been on RT radio, local radio, Clare Champion, local papers as well, telling our story. And I think when you tell the story and whatever, then that does make politicians more aware, it makes other stakeholders more aware of some of the impacts. So tell stories. Social media, so again, this is a Facebook page. I can make one post and get sort of 16,000 post reach to help basically project a story, to help tell a story, and to get some reaction from the story as well. Design consultants, because we compile so much local knowledge, design consultants firms that were interested in this type of a thing called to us again at the kitchen table. They called to say, can you tell us a bit more about, can we walk the land? So we actually had 2 or 3 consultants visit us. They read the blogs. We got them to present at our meetings and say, well, what's the scheme? What would you do? And so there was definitely interaction. The appointment is probably going to be in the coming week. It'll be surprise, so we have no idea who's going to be there. But also another aspect is the tendering process. When it did happen, is the blog sites, those 41 articles were read very significantly. Recommendations then, finally. Be informed, build up your knowledge, your local knowledge. Do not underestimate we've seen little snippets of it, the things that you can do locally. Technical in terms of how flooding happens. We've seen very good examples of that here. The process, what does a solution look like? How do I develop a solution? Or how is a solution developed within the OPW or within Galway County Council? How does a minor work scheme work? Who do I apply to? What are these impact assessments, Natura reports, etc.? Be progressive, be professional and respectful. Again, nobody's an enemy here. Everybody wants to get rid of flooding from our perspective. So, but what's the negotiation? What do these people need as well? Be progressive. Look at solutions, not problems. There has to be solutions that should be solution oriented. Be assertive, be vocal, and then give credit. And I think a lot of credit from our perspective I've shown is with our OPW, Galway County Council, National Parks and Wildlife. Our own committee has been very, very proactive. And that just shows that when you do all this, you get trust and you can definitely get solutions a lot quicker. So that's one quick snapshot, keeping people informed. I got this last week whereby I said, look, this is how the consultants are selected. This is where we are. That's all I said. And the process is painfully slow from their perspective because they're living with flood issues right now, even though it's not flooding. It's explained in English, illustrated in great detail, but we can understand it better. And seeing a time frame gives some level of optimism for the future. So that's giving a certain community resident, that's giving them hope where they see more rainfall coming and they say, okay, something's in the line, something's happening. So that's basically that gives them a level of hope for the future. So thanks very much.